Mongolia. Hearing that, you probably thought of Genghis Khan, which is fair enough. He is, after all, one of the greatest yet most ruthless world leaders who ruled the largest ever contiguous empire. Also, there's a good chance you're a distant relative of his. But Mongolia had another leader who, while not ruling over an enormous empire and living hundreds of years later, was just as fearless as his nation's most famous emperor. He lived at the same time as another infamous dictator, Joseph Stalin, known for his iron fist rule and ruthless treatment of dissenters. According to Alexander Solzhenitsyn, Stalin had a man executed for being the first to stop applauding after one of the dictator's speeches. But amidst Stalin's reign of terror, a figure emerged in the form of Mongol president Pelgidin Gendon, who would defy the dictator and the Soviet colossus in about as brazen a manner as you can imagine. Mongolia was never officially part of the Soviet Union, but it was a satellite state and had close ties with the USSR during the majority of the 20th century. After a Soviet-backed revolution in 1921, the Mongolian People's Republic was established, and it became a socialist state closely aligned with the Soviet Union. Like other Soviet satellite states in the Eastern Bloc, Mongolia received technical, economic, and military assistance from the USSR in exchange for complete ideological devotion and political submission. Born around 1895, Pelgidin Gendon's political life began when he joined the Mongolian Revolutionary Youth League in 1922. He continued to climb the political ladder, becoming Mongolia's head of state in 1924. Then, in 1928, Gendon became one of 3 secretaries of the Mongolian People's Revolutionary Party's Central Committee. He swiftly implemented socialist economic policies including forced agricultural collectivization, bans on private enterprise, the closure of monasteries, and the execution of hundreds of families of noble birth. This proved disastrous for Mongolia, and its people weren't happy. They showed their displeasure by starting a revolt. Equally unhappy was the Soviet Union's new leader, Joseph Stalin, who had come to power in 1924 following the death of Vladimir Lenin. Mongolia's Muscovite overlords decided to suspend the socialist policies in Mongolia, which were deemed leftist deviations and prematurely implemented. True to form, Stalin purged the Mongolian government in 1932, but somehow Gendon came out the other end, not only unscathed, but promoted. With Stalin's backing, Gendon became the chairman of the Assembly of People's Commissaries in charge of implementing Mongolia's New-Turn economic plan. This plan aimed to ease some of the strict communist economic principles, and the result was a stronger Mongolian economy. Gendon's popularity soared as shortages decreased, and the government gained more influence. However, Gendon's relationship with Stalin began to deteriorate in 1934 when Stalin began pushing for the eradication of Mongolia's Buddhist clergy. Contrary to Soviet ideals, Gendon had great respect for his nation's religious traditions and had allowed Mongolian lamas to practice their religion in public. Gendon became resentful of Soviet influence in Mongolia and so delayed agreements that would have increased Soviet military presence in the country. This was all brought to a head in December 1935 when Gendon was summoned to Moscow, where he was rebuked for failing to toe the party line. This was the last straw for Gendon. He later attended an event at the Mongolian embassy in Moscow, where he became inebriated. Perhaps emboldened by the liquor, he publicly scolded Stalin, shouting, "You bloody Georgian, you have become a virtual Russian Tsar." As the story goes, Gendon strode boldly up to Stalin and slapped him across the face, the force of the blow sending Stalin's smoking pipe flying from his mouth and breaking on the ground. From that very moment, Gendon had sealed his fate. Stalin orchestrated Gendon's removal from political office in March 1936. Not long after that, accusations of sabotaging Soviet-Mongolian relations were leveled against him, and he was placed under house arrest. In April 1936, Gendon was invited to the USSR, supposedly to receive medical treatment. Upon arrival, he was promptly arrested and, according to Soviet records, confessed to conspiring with Lamaist reactionaries and Japanese spies. Gendon was executed in Moscow on the 26th of November 1937 and was declared persona non grata. He became yet another victim of Stalin's Great Purge. Following Stalin's death in 1953 and his denouncement by the Soviet Union, Gendon was rehabilitated in 1956 during the time known as the Khrushchev Thaw. Although by no means a paragon of virtue, Pelgidin Gendon stands as a symbol of resilience. He was a leader who dared to challenge a tyrant and was a throwback to his defiant Mongol heritage. If you enjoyed this video, we think you'll also be interested in these next ones. To continue supporting our channel, please consider clicking the like button and subscribing to History Hot Takes.